In the deadliest court in history, loyalty was a death sentence. In Byzantium, everyone had a price. Gold bought generals. Titles bought loyalty. Emperors were betrayed. Friends were assassinated. And power was never inherited. Only taken, but one group never turned. Not for gold. Not for power. Not even for survival. Foreigners. Outsiders. Axe in hand, standing in silence. The emperor trusted them above all others, because they didn't belong. So, in a world built on betrayal, why were they the only ones who couldn't be bought? To understand their loyalty, you first have to understand the world they stood in. The Byzantine court was not a place of order. It was a battlefield without armies. Inside the great halls of Constantinople, power shifted in whispers. A glance could be a threat. A smile could be a death sentence. Emperors did not rule for decades. They survived for years. If they were lucky, some were poisoned. Others were blinded. Many were dragged from their thrones by the very men sworn to protect them. In Teeth world, loyalty was not a virtue. It was a weakness. And yet, in the middle of this storm, stood a group of men who never bent. The Varangian Guard. They came from the frozen north, from lands far beyond the reach of Byzantine politics. At first, they were Norse warriors, Vikings, men who had crossed oceans in search of gold and glory. Later, they were joined by Anglo-Saxons, exiles who had lost their homeland. They shared no language with the court, no blood ties, no ambitions within the empire. They did not belong, and that was their greatest strength. Because in Byzantium, betrayal was born from connection, family, alliances, ambition. Constantinople, but the Varangians had none of these. They were not part of the game. They were paid to stand outside it. Their loyalty was not to a faction or a noble house. It was to one man, the emperor. And their oath was not a simple promise, it was sacred. In the Norse tradition, an oath was more than words. It was a bond that reached beyond death. To break it was to lose honor, identity, and the right to be remembered. So when a Varangian swore to protect the emperor, he was not making a political decision. He was defining who he was. There was also something else. Silence. Most of them did not speak Greek. They did not understand the subtle language of intrigue, the hidden meanings behind polite conversation. They could not be drawn into conspiracies because they could not hear them. While nobles plotted in whispers, the Varangians stood apart, watching, waiting, unmoved. And then there was gold. Guards. Watch. The emperor paid them generously, more than most soldiers could ever dream of. And when an emperor died, they were granted a rare privilege. They could enter the imperial treasury and take what they could carry. It was called the Tasforf, a final reward, a system designed with brutal clarity. Stay loyal, and you will be rewarded beyond measure. Betray, and you lose everything. So while Byzantine generals weighed their chances and nobles calculated their betrayals, the Varangians had no reason to choose. Their path was already decided. They were not politicians. They were guardians, and in a world where every man looked for advantage, they stood as something rare. Men who did not move, even during the most violent coups, when emperors were dragged from their thrones. The Varangian Guard did not join the chaos. They did not switch sides. They did not hesitate. They stood by the emperor until the very end. And if he fell, only then would they step aside, because their loyalty was never to power. It was to the man who held it. In the end, in the most treacherous empire of the medieval world, the only men who could be trusted were the ones who had no place within it. In the end, the most loyal men in Byzantium were the ones who had nothing to gain from betraying it.